Yeah, this is super exciting. Well, you have a lot going on. I mean, just to give some context right now to anybody listening, what are you doing right now? Where are you? What's happening in your life?
Absolutely. So we are actually in the midst of our theatrical run for Plight. We opened in Kansas last night, so we were out there. It was a terrific crowd, very engaged. We actually opened in St. Francis. It's a little town in northwestern Kansas where we shot the majority of the film pre-vaccine during COVID. And so the community was so supportive. They came out in droves to help us. And so, we wanted to bring the film back. And so mapping out theatrical, that was actually one of the locations that we had a contingent, and working with our distributor and timing and working with the venues. And it worked out that we were able to play there. So now I'm back in Denver. We open in Boulder this weekend. Yeah, we're just in the midst of that theatrical tour right now.
That's really cool, and I love the idea of you had your premiere in the town that you shot it at.
So we actually had our premiere on June 13th in Beverly Hills, and we had a 1 week opening run. Yeah, and so what we've been doing essentially is having a theatrical tour to support the theatrical run. So every place we go, we are treating it as a red carpet premiere. With a step and repeat, photos, press, engaging with the community, and a lot of our cast and crew are going to be at each one. And so the film will play in the theaters, but that opening night we'll be doing premiere festivities for each.
I love that you're totally eventizing each screening, and I think that's such a wonderful way to go about this. And I want to actually dive into that in much more detail in a second, but I'd love to just go all the way back and tell people, like, what is Plight? How did this movie come about, and more specifically, how did you even get started in film that led you to this, to this moment? I love these stories.
Yeah, it's a lot to cover. So I'll start with Plight. Plight came about really just wanting to tell stories. It's a fictitious narrative, but stories about, textured real people, people that, we see every day, many of us, and like thrust into adverse situations. How will we react? Viewing our own moral compass as we view these characters and on their journey, centering in on building the characters for Plight. I did that first, and then I kind of mapped out the plot. I felt like if I know these characters, down to the T, basically understanding, every little thing that happened in their lives, I'm better informed in writing the script and, how they'd react in a certain situation when you're actually fleshing out the story. And so, I wrote that. And, we were actually producing another film at the time and a TV series. And we had a finished film that was ready to premiere on March 13th, 2020, out in Los Angeles. So, we all headed out there. And, if you remember, it's the day before the NBA cancels their season, the NHL canceled their season. And then, our premiere kind of went on at this festival. And we were a few weeks out from rolling into pre-production on Plight. And so we had to kind of hit pause, put our ears to the ground, really do our due diligence in making sure that we had a safe approach to production, following the testing. Everyone was kind of navigating the virus. We were able to assemble an amazing team that just dedicated cast and crew that wanted to make a film. We quarantined in place in that small town in St. Francis, Kansas, tested everybody, and then nobody was allowed to leave. So we're all, shooting in certain zones, but also staying in some of the houses and the locations and separating each department so that, there's not a chance of, not a strong chance of getting the virus at that point. And luckily we were able to do that and, get through production.
That's such an interesting, journey that you had to go on. And so many filmmakers at that time, like I've run into so many that were like, yeah, we started shooting middle of March, or we were slated to shoot and we had to shut down and push. And look, like it affected the entire world and film industries everywhere. And so, yeah, it's just so interesting to hear how people navigated that, especially when you don't have a big studio behind you where you can just sort of close the doors, lock up, keep renting the soundstage for a little while. And it's insurance and all of these things. But, as an indie, you don't have those kinds of resources. So you really had to figure out a way to make this happen. But, kudos to you and your team for figuring out a way to still shoot the movie and not just let it die. I'd also love to learn more about what is Plight about? What's the story? What's, the log line? What can you tell us about the story?
Well, it starts off with this tragic accident. and it follows this couple that there's a hit and run accident, and one of them perishes, and the his father is seeking justice and looking for answers, pushing authorities to get to the bottom of it. He loses his son, and his son's fiance is in a hospital, and she's fighting for her life. And her sister actually comes over from Ukraine. They grew up in Ukraine, and comes over to work every job she can to try to pay for medical and to keep her sister alive. And the two of them, the sister Valentina and the father Joe, they kind of come from two very different backgrounds, but they have a lot of the same sort of core family values. And they come together to really, get to the bottom of what happened, and
They start to peel back the layers and take justice into their own hands in a way.
Yeah. It's always interesting. Whenever I describe the story, it's like I'm the type of person where I watch trailers. I don't want to know anything, but I know like I have to, so I'm careful to navigate on what happens. But really, it's about, like you said, taking justice into their hands, but really seeking ways to honor their family, to protect their family. At the end of the day, like that's one of the biggest themes of the film is family, and how important it is, and really looking at the dichotomy of if your family is in an adverse situation and or predicament that you really need to act, to do something to protect them or honor them or keep them alive, what would you do? And asking those questions, on the surface level, many people may feel like they know how they'd react, but when you're actually thrust in the middle of that situation, it becomes a little bit more in the gray. And I feel like we all live in the gray, and so I like to create the characters that live in the gray. Nothing really in life is black and white, and so trying to paint them with accurate brushstrokes, if we say.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's how far will you go to protect the ones you love, do the right thing to make things right? Those stories just resonate with audiences all over the world. And so it's no wonder that you've had a very successful festival run, got a distributor, and are now, making waves in theatrical as well. It's great to see. Talking about development of this film, what was the inspiration for it? Is this something, this is a thriller, right? A dramatic thriller. Are these the types of movies you grew up watching? Did you always want to direct and write something like this?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I grew up watching films with my parents, at a young age, and really just enjoying the experience of transforming to different worlds, and, feeling like I'm in the shoes of the characters and their predicaments and what they're facing. But I always felt like, even with films I really enjoyed, like, I wish they did that. I wish this character did this, or I wish, the film did X, Y, Z. And I didn't really know that I was kind of directing in my mind, and I had a vision for maybe how a story would transpire or a character would react. And so the impetus for becoming a filmmaker really was just, hey, I want to tell my own story. I was 14 years old, and I grabbed some friends together. I had this little notebook. I wrote down different stories, and we had a bike, and we had these really cool hills. And, the first day was a disaster. Two of my friends didn't show up. The friend with the camera, like, he got grounded the night before, and I didn't know. This was like cell phones were just being introduced. And so, to date myself, but it's like, that was the first experience. And then everything from then, I was able to build. I made the first feature film at 15.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So public access that had one little iMac, learning on the iMac, and then like an A/B studio, and kind of learning cuts editing and learning like how everything from a film is put together, and then taking the camera out, grabbing friends, shooting after school, shooting on the weekends. And then we got into some film festivals, and we had a local Cinemark, and I thought, let's do a red carpet premiere. And so I've been doing this for a while. You talk to their corporate office was in Plano, Texas, and I'm talking to them, and I'm 15, and they were like, well, wait a minute, we need to talk to your parents. But we were able to find a way to rent the theater.
Who is this kid all of a sudden? Yeah, talking to the cinema. That's amazing, and it's so great that you're just like, well, why not just pick up the phone and call them? Like, why not just take matters into my own hands? I want to make a movie. I want people to see my movie. I love it. That's fantastic. That's what you have to do.
You have to, and that's the thing. So I had guidance counselors. I grew up in Western Massachusetts. Not a huge hotbed for film, but they would always say, well, go to business school, and then you can go to art school, or go to art school, and then you can go to film school. And I had one teacher who was great. He was, he actually had this alternative learning program that he created for me while I was working on the film. So I was able to get elective credits, and he was the head of the technology department. And he just encouraged me. He said, you're already doing it right now, so continue doing it. And that was kind of my mindset. My parents instilled in me as well. Like, at a very young age, you can do and you can be whoever you want to be. And obviously, to a kid, to me, you don't think of geopolitics. You don't think of like things in the world. You're like, great. Well, this is what I want to do. I want to do this. And for the longest time, I was going to be in the NBA, and that was my goal. And then I fell in love with film, and I said, well, I can love basketball from afar. I'm going to be a filmmaker. And so it was the best film school. I said all that to say it was the best film school for me, trying to make films, because every time you get better, you learn things, you troubleshoot different ways. And so I always encourage people that, sometimes people ask me, like, well, how did you do this? Did you take this step, that step? And like, really, I say there's so many different paths you can take. Some are going to be great. Some that might not be great, actually inform you on what's not great so that you can get on the right path. But ultimately, no matter what the case is, keep making films. If you're a filmmaker, you make films. If you're a producer, you produce. If you're a director, you have to direct, and so on and so forth.
Well, there's so much to unpack there, and I can totally relate, because when I was a teenager as well, making movies with my friends, and we were getting into smaller festivals with our student films. So many family members that would say, "Well, go to business school. You're good with computers. Why don't you get into like computer science and then do this as a hobby?" It's like, no, I've wanted to be a director since I was 5 years old. I'm going to film school, or I'm going to be making movies, and I'm going to figure this out. There is no backup plan. Where our paths diverge a little bit is that I went to Vancouver Film School, which is a 1-year program. And I specifically chose that film school because it was only 1 year, where I'm like, I don't want to go to UBC or Capilano for a 4-year, degree in film, because it's really not going to help me. Getting into the industry, making things, getting your hands dirty, and networking and meeting people, that's what it's about. And so I totally agree with you. Going out and just making the movie is the path to making movies. And it's so great to hear that it was a guidance counselor that you were saying, right? That encouraged you to.
The guidance counselor was against it. Some of my teachers were against it. It was my, he kind of wore many hats. He was our technology, head of the technology department. That's how it was back then. They just like a blanket word, technology. But he was he was my wood shop teacher. He was, there was an editing program, but not really, not exact. It was kind of a communications class. But yeah, he was the one who encouraged. And actually, funny enough, our paths actually don't diverge that much, because what I ended up doing, I moved out to LA with that goal. I don't want to do 4 years. I don't want to sit 2 years of gen eds, and I know what I want. I was about to go to LA Film School and get the loan and do all that. And I had a friend of a friend who worked at TNT. He brought me into this office. It's like in Burbank. He had this huge bow window and like 3 sides. And he's like, I look out and I see what freeway I take at going home. Like, that was his flex of like, I'm like, yeah, this office is great. And he told me, he said, forget all that with the school. He's like, go to UCLA Extension. You get instructors who work in the industry. You could build your own like curriculum, or you can take their programs. And I looked at it and it was great. You had some household, below the line names that I knew. And then, I'm in class and there were some A-listers in my classes. I had a class with Bryce Dallas Howard, and we're sitting there in class learning something. Rick Fox was in there learning something with me. And like, it was incredible because I did do that. I built my own curriculum, really went to school to study what I could apply to film and to my career, not just to try to pass the class or get an A. That wasn't my concern. It was, how do I advance my skill set in this film industry?